The mission is to save kids from life imprisonment and premature death in the streets. I make a little bit of money doing YouTube, but I do it because it's therapeutic and I think it helps people. And it helps, a lot of dudes that got out of prison. Like if you look at the comments, dudes like, damn, bro, you made me think today not to do the wrong thing. I don't want to go back. So I think that's kind of like some reentry help. And also my book, Blood on the Razor Wire. They can go on Amazon, check out the first 3 chapters for free. I promise you will not be disappointed. People read the book in one day. It actually sold out the first day on Amazon. But you can check us out on Amazon. I do have autographed copies that I sell independently. People hit me up on my email at freedomfighterspc@gmail.com. And now the mic's yours. It's your show, Caden.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the DAWG podcast. Today we have Chad Marks with us with Blood on the Razor Wire TV. How you doing, Chad?
I'm doing good. How are you guys?
Pretty good. All right.
Good.
So you want a little synopsis on me, right?
Yes.
Okay, so my name's Chad Marks. At the age of 24, I was sentenced to a 40-year federal mandatory minimum, federal prison, for a nonviolent drug crime. That's what I was actually convicted of. I served 18 years. Donald Trump passed what was called the First Step Act. And because of that, they gave federal judges the authority to go back and relook at cases and say, you know what? I think this guy should get out of prison. I think I gave him too much time. I think he changed his life. And you know what? I'm going to do that. So my judge ended up doing that. He went to Notre Dame. He's a Notre Dame guy. And I was the first person that he had ever done that for. He had been a federal judge for 30-something years. I believe he was appointed by Ronald Reagan, Republican, right? Supposed to be hard-nosed against crime. But he said, you know what? I think you changed your life, and I'm going to give you a shot. I'm going to give you a chance. And he reduced my sentence from 40 years to 20 years. I got out of prison, started a paralegal and prison consultant firm. While I was in prison, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't always a nice guy. It took about 8-9 years for me to want to change my life. Ended up getting a college degree. Ended up doing a bunch of law work in prison. Became one of the best, or known as the best jailhouse lawyer. I actually wrote the first compassionate release motion that got all the people out of prison. I mean, lawyers and stuff have made it better since then. But I became a jailhouse lawyer, got out of prison and said, you know what, I'm going to start a paralegal and prison consultant firm. I've done that, and I've probably helped over 100 people, men and women, get out of prison. And I also have a YouTube channel, and the mission for the YouTube channel is to save kids from life imprisonment and premature death in the streets through our stories and experiences. We interview people, not always nice guys, former gang members. I've interviewed former police on there, former prison cops, former federal court judge. I mean, we do some big things over there, but we're trying to give people, hey, this is the road. You can go this road or you can go this road. And if you choose the wrong road, this is what's going to happen. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great to hear. Truman, if you'd like to give yourself a little introduction for the audience.
My name's Truman Johansson. Currently, I'm a college student. I studied business administration at a community college in Indiana, Ivy Tech Kokomo, and I plan on transferring to Purdue to pursue the same major next year.
My name is Alex Stark, and I am currently attending Purdue University. I am majoring in environmental sciences and minoring in soil science.
I'm Jacob Hausinger. I'm also attending Purdue. I'm going to major in forestry. That's about it.
All right. And then I'm Caden Weaver. And the reason we wanted to bring you on today is I'm in a club called Alternative Break Program. And over spring break, I was able to execute on a plan that I had come up with another site leader over the past 5 months. We went to DC with 4 other participants, and we talked to some partner organizations, more specifically the National Reentry for Returning Citizens. And we got to talk to returning citizens as well as learn more about the legislation and grant funding that they have in DC. And it was really astonishing to just see how corrupt and how capitalistic viewed prisons are, especially when you talk about private prisons. And we just wanted to get you on here and get a personal experience, just to basically outline what went down with you. So I guess we'll start off a little bit before I went on the trip, we talked a little bit about the First Step Act, and you would say that it was good, right? Donald Trump.
100%. I mean, it gave people an opportunity to get out of prison that deserve a second chance to reclaim their lives, that were sitting in prison like myself thinking, wow, I came in here at 24, I'm going to get out when I'm 64. What am I going to do with my life? So I think it was a big part, a big piece of legislation that, helped people that deserve a second chance.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree with you. There are many proponents of it. We did an educational event beforehand for our participants, and it was one of the executive heads that basically put on a debate, rather it being pros or cons. And a lot of the cons were just that it only affected a low percentage, about 13% of all inmates in prisons, and that a lot of people thought that it was kind of just a band-aid on the prison system because of how many people it affected, but also because it didn't change any fundamental rules. It really just changed the back end of it. So would you agree with that?
I mean, to a certain extent, yeah. I mean, we needed more. So let me give you an example. You want an example? I'll give you an example. I was sentenced under what's called 924C stacking, right? It's 5 years for a gun, 25 years for a second gun, on top of whatever you get for the drug charges. So in my case, I know earlier I said it's a nonviolent crime. It is. 924C is possession of a firearm and furtherance of a drug trafficking crime and or a crime of violence. So you got guys that are sitting in prison with these stacked 924C sentences, let's say, 180 years. There's a kid I used to write about all the time, Jamel Azell out of Philadelphia. I used to write for Criminal Legal News and Prisoners Legal News, and I would highlight his story. This is a kid that was young, poor, growing up in the ghetto, didn't have much, and he robbed, a Domino's pizza, and then he went and robbed an Arby's. And, I'm not saying that he shouldn't be punished. Of course he should be punished. But what happens is they would take the gun charges and put them all in one indictment. You get 5 for the first gun, 25 for the second, 25 for the next, and just they would stack them, right? So now you got 180 years, you're 19 years old, you're never getting out of prison. So what the First Step Act did was it said, you know what? That isn't what Congress intended. Congress, when they passed this law, they intended for it to be, you get 5 years for a gun and drugs, right? Or 5 years for a gun and whatever you get for the robbery, 10. You do 15 years, you get out of prison, you didn't learn your lesson. So now if you do it again, now it's 25 years. But the government wasn't doing that. Law enforcement, what they would do is, let's say in a drug case like mine, they would bust us. We'd get out. They got the one gun. They got the 5 years, right? They found a 12-gauge shotgun. So now I'm going to get 5 years for that gun. They let me go. There's a conspiracy, that they're working, they're putting together. 2 weeks later, they bust another house. They find a 22 rifle. Now I got 5 for the 12-gauge shotgun, 25 for the 22 rifle, right? Some people might be like, well, you know what? You got guns. Well, I understand that. There has to be punishment. But what they would do is now they would stack those and they would say, yeah, this is what Congress intended. That's not what Congress intended. So the First Step Act came back and said, you know what? What Congress intended was for it to be a recidivist enhancement. But now this is the issue. It was a recidivist enhancement, so we're going to fix it. We're going to say that you can't do that no more. But all the guys that are sitting in prison like Chad Marks and Weldon Angelos and Jamel Azell, it doesn't apply to them. So how can you say that the law is wrong, that you got it wrong, but it doesn't apply to these people? I mean, that was something that is wrong, right? Do you guys agree?
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
If it's wrong, it's wrong. It's wrong for everybody. It's not just wrong for the guys that are getting arrested now. It's wrong for everyone. So the First Step Back, what it did was said, hey, look, judges can consider these things, right, as an extraordinary and compelling reason. And if the judge finds that, there's extraordinary and compelling reasons, he can reduce the sentence. And in my case, the judge says the 924C stacking, what Congress said, what they intended, that's an extraordinary and compelling reason on top of your rehabilitation. And I'm going to reduce your sentence to 20 years. I'm going to give you 10 for the drugs, 5 for the first gun, and 5 for the second gun. But now you might be in Florida, right? And in federal district court in Florida, the courts are saying, well, you know what? The judge doesn't have that authority to do that in Florida. So I committed the same crime as a guy in Florida, but the guy in Florida can't get out on compassionate release under the First Step Act, but I can in New York. Sounds crazy, right? So that's an example. The First Step Act also changed what was called 851. And I think this is important for your viewers. 851, let's say you had one prior drug felony. You would get 10 years as your mandatory minimum, but now it's 20 because you had one prior, right? And your prior might have been 3 dime bags of crack because you're a drug addict. Then they said, hey, you know what? If you had 2 priors and you got a new drug crime, now it's life under 21 U.S.C. 851. So Congress came back and said in the First Step Back, you know what? That's wrong. We're going to reduce the 20 to 15, and we're going to reduce because these are really nonviolent drug offenders, we're going to reduce the life down to 20 or 25. And guess what? It doesn't apply to the people that are already in jail, only the new people. So people were arguing on compassionate release that this is an extraordinary and compelling reason to reduce the sentence under the First Step Act. The changes in law on top of whatever else, 851s with rehabilitation or the living conditions under COVID. So, I mean, the First Step Act did some stuff, but it needed to be fixed. It needs to be better. And I was hoping that Joe Biden would do it. And I'm not saying I'm a Trump fan, but I mean, the dude let me, it was his administration is the reason I got out. And Biden hasn't done anything.
Mhm.
So I think that's very disappointing. During the debates, Cory Booker, I don't know if you guys watched the debates, but Cory Booker said, I'm going to challenge everybody up here. If you become president, to let these guys out on clemency, where we said the First Step Act, that this stuff is wrong, and we want to we're going to make this so it's not retroactive. So all these people that are affected, I think we should go ahead and give them clemency. I'm challenging everybody to do it. And people are on stage like, yeah, we're going to really look into it. And here we are, going on 4 years, and Joe Biden hasn't done anything. So I'm disappointed in that.
It's just empty promises. No, thank you for that. I think you brought up some valid points and just how counteractive it was, but how it really saved a lot of people's lives. Now, you were originally going to be in for 40 years, and it wasn't until you were almost done with 18 years that they counteracted that. So can you speak on behalf of, you said that you learned the law while you were in prison, correct?
Yeah.
So why would you learn the law when you still had another 22 years left?
So this is how it goes, right? You go to prison. Now, remember, I was 24 years old, sentenced to 40 years. And I felt like, damn, no one's going to fight for my life like me. So when I first go in there, I still have some hope, right? I got some appeals pending. I have a phenomenal attorney out of Buffalo, New York, who gets in a car accident. I paid him. He can't, continue to represent me. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals says, look, we're not giving any extensions. Sorry you got in a car accident, but this is it. So I ended up getting another lawyer by the name of Jillian Harrington. She's in New Jersey, phenomenal lawyer, great friend. She worked at Columbia Law. But I'm always thinking in my head, no one's going to fight for my life like I am. Every lawyer's got a caseload this high. So, how much time can you really spend on my case? So I started going to the law library. I mean, I was doing that pre-trial. And, it just continued. I'm like, I got to fight for my own life. I got to help my lawyer with my appeal. I got to make sure it's right. I got 40 years. And, I did that. I wrote all my own stuff. And then eventually someone had asked me to help them. And I helped the dude. And I ended up winning his case. And then I did another case on a post-conviction on what's called the 28 U.S.C. 2255, a habeas corpus petition. And I did that for a guy out of Florida, and I won that. So, that's kind of how my jailhouse lawyer experience started. But I won numerous cases in prison. Like I said, no one's going to fight for your life like you are. And, people are tuning in, and this ain't a mock on lawyers, but I've been home almost 3 years. I work with lawyers all over the country. And unfortunately, there's a lot of lawyers that don't give a shit. And let me give you the reality of that. I was working with a lawyer, and he's trying to act like he's cool, because I was in prison, and he's giving me he's like, let me tell you something. This guy hired me. He robbed McDonald's. He robbed Burger King. He's running around robbing all these places. You think I want to help this dude get out of jail? He's a real piece of shit. I mean, this is the lawyer telling me this, right? He's like, I got a 16-year-old daughter that works at McDonald's. You think I want him to get out and rob a McDonald's that my daughter's working at? So that just gives you the mindset, I don't think it's right that anybody's out robbing McDonald's. But I also think that, when you're an attorney and you're hired, you're supposed to fight for people, right? You got constitutional rights and, I don't know, that just struck me. But that's just an example. Not all attorneys are like that, but a lot of them are, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think a lot of that also has to deal with compassion and their underlining motives. Like I said, a lot of this, learning about the last couple of years, a lot of this is ran by just capitalistic greed, no matter what industry you're really in, whether that be with law or with prisons. I mean, privatized prisons is just ridiculous to me. Now,
I was housed in a private prison pre-trial.
how many prisons, how many times were you moved, and like where to? Because I know that's a very common thing too.
Let's see. I started out, in the beginning, I was just, I was a young kid, man, facing a life sentence. Didn't really care. I got moved from county jail to county jail. I did a lot of fighting in there. there is oppression in jail and prison, the stuff that people hear on the news or you see in movies. There's certain, people that are targeted, right? Certain groups. And people think, oh, they got money, man. I'm about to take what he's got, or I want his commissary. I mean, those things do happen. So I was the type of dude that wasn't going for it. Not that I'm a tough guy or the baddest man on the planet, but if you try to take something from me, we're going to have a physical altercation. And I had numerous physical altercations. But eventually when I went to federal prison, my first prison was Big Sandy, one of the most dangerous prisons in the country at the time. I would say up there within the top 5, federal or state. I mean, people are getting stabbed. People are getting killed in these places. Went from Big Sandy. I ended up in USP Lee, Pollock. I've been to 5 or 6 prisons, right? When something happens in a prison, you have a physical altercation. I've been stabbed in prison. Not because I did anything wrong, but because someone owed me money and he didn't want to pay me, so he decided he would stab me. So I ended up going to, a few different prisons. When you have a physical altercation, you end up on a bus. Like, okay, we're going to send you you're from New York, but we're going to send you to California. We're going to send you to Arizona. You know what? We're going to send you all the way to Louisiana. And I've been in prisons in Louisiana, Florida, New York, I was grateful. Kentucky, spent a lot of time in Kentucky. So they move you around, man. They move you around depending on what's going on at the prison.
Yeah. One of the things that's different about DC is because it's not an actual state, is that you can get picked up in DC and be sent to Washington, in like Seattle. And it's crazy to think, because the main cause of homelessness in DC isn't expensive living rates, which it is, but because of the amount of people that come out of prison have to somehow find a way to move 3,000 miles back home, and they have no halfway homes, or they don't have like privatized living for these returning citizens, which I think is ridiculous. And I mean, it's the capital, and we can't even get homelessness off the streets.
I mean, that's the other part of this. A lot of people are, they want to be on YouTube or they want to be in the news talking about what they're doing. We're going to help these people. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't really care. That's kind of what I'm starting to try to get into now, is we're going to try to buy a house and do some reentry housing here in my city, in Rochester, New York. That's my next plan.
Do you guys have any questions?
You said that you were arrested when you were 24, correct?
Yes.
What was your first moment where you were like, you realized like you messed up, that you were going to be spending pretty much the rest of your life in jail? What was that moment for you?
It wasn't that I realized that I was going to spend the rest of my life in jail, but this was the defining moment. I was arrested by local authorities, right? Go to local court. I'm at court. My wife, who I'm married to now, she ends up, I get a bail, $5,000. I bail out, and they're taking forever to give me my property. And I'm like, something ain't right. I start to feel like, what's up? And I'm telling the guard, like, hey, what's up, man? I'm bailed out. What are you waiting on? Oh, hold on, we're getting your stuff. So they get my stuff, and I put my pants on. I'm walking out. I'm putting my belt on, and I walk out of the jail. They buzz the door. Bzzz. And when I'm walking out, I walk into this lobby, and I see 2 white dudes like standing at the bulletin board, one by the door and one to my right, right? And instantly they said, hey, Chad, how are you? And I'm like, they say, hey, man, we're taking you across the street. We're going to take you over to the federal building to be arraigned. We're charging you federally now. So I'd been in jail for 3 or 4 days. It's a state case. State case, you're going to get a whole lot less time. You hire a good lawyer. You end up, with probation, 2-3 years. You go to a shock camp. You're out in 6 months. Well, now they take me over to federal court. And when I get to federal court, I remember thinking, like, something jogged my memory, right? Like, I went back to watching things like Leave It to Beaver. And I'm like, this courtroom looks like someone's den off Leave It to Beaver, like some father's den. And I'm like, this is real, man. And they start reading off the charges, and they say, you're facing 10 years to life. And I said, 10 years to life? And what resonated in my mind was the life, right? I can get life? Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that. I always thought, man, I'd pay a lawyer. I had some money. I'd pay a lawyer and I'd get shot camp and I'd be all right. But that isn't how it turned out. So that was like the moment, man. And then, and I had asked you, hey, you're going to be a prosecutor? Not all prosecutors are bad. I mean, we need prosecutors. You can't live in a lawless land, right? But what killed me was when I was found guilty. That was also the defining moment where I said, I'm never going to get out. I'm going to die in prison. I thought that I would probably get a life sentence. because they were giving out life like it was candy. And I, by the grace of God, I had a good judge who gave me the 40-year mandatory minimum eventually. But, when they sentenced me, the prosecutors, everybody from upstairs, the law students that are working there, the paralegals, there's like 20 people in there. They give me life and they're like giving each other fist bumps. And my mother's sitting there crying. Do I deserve to go to prison? 100%. Did I deserve 40 years at the age of 24? I didn't. Should they have come in there and been fist bumping like it was a celebration? They celebrated that a 24-year-old was getting, and honestly, mentally, I was still a kid in some aspects, right? I was a man in some aspects, but also a kid. But they're celebrating that I just got sentenced to 40 years while my mother's sitting there crying. I mean, that's horrible. I mean, who rejoices in that? I was a drug dealer and, the quote unquote a bad person. But that would never make me happy, man. When people get hurt or anything, I don't like to see that, then or now. Homeless people, kids suffering, that stuff bothers me, man. It always bothered me. But yet they were joyful in my suffering, man. So that was the defining moments in my life.
So kind of piggybacking off of, you said your next project was providing housing in Rochester in your local situation. So obviously you're already very encompassed in this work, but for us and our viewers personally, we don't really have that much experience. So with having these people just been released, what do you think are some things that us as normal citizens could do to help these people? Like, what are some things they're looking for that they need desperately as soon as they get out?
Well, successful reentry starts on day one, right? The first day you go to prison. Mm-hmm. Reentry should be starting, you got a 10-year sentence, it should start day one. You need to get involved in programs. You need to rehabilitate. You need to learn to appreciate your freedom. You need to be prepared to walk out of prison and be able to go to a job interview with your shirt tucked in and your hair combed, and you got to be ready, right? You can't walk out here and be like, yo, what's up? I need a job. You know what I'm saying? Like, people aren't hiring you. So you got to get people job ready instead of jail ready, right? And I think it starts on day one. Citizens out in the public, if you're not involved in this work, I mean, there's really not much that, just the average guy down the street can do to help a guy that's getting out of prison. But some of my obstacles were, I thought I was getting out of prison, I was going to be fine, but things were tough, crossing the street. I was nervous to cross the street. I didn't know how to use a credit card. And I got out and everybody's using cards, you're using a machine and you're tapping and you're punching in your code. And I didn't know any of that stuff. I wasn't prepared. I actually had an incident at Walmart where a guy called me. He said, he's kind of boisterous. He said, what are you, a dumb mother effer? Because I didn't know what I was doing. And I turned around and said, you know what? I just did 20 years in prison. That was the first time that I kind of snapped. I was embarrassed. You know what I mean? And this guy's swearing at me, cussing, doesn't know me from a hole in the ground, but I didn't know what I was doing. So those are some of the obstacles. Obviously, housing, employment, clothing. What's a guy going to do that gets out that don't have any clothes? And I'm going to give you an example. I have a very close friend who did 20 years named James Thompson. He's an older guy. He's about 57. He gets out of prison. And they say, hey, you're going to North Carolina. You're leaving today. Like they changed his date because of the First Step Act, like a year and a half early. He wasn't expecting to go home that morning. He's like, hey, you're leaving. And he's like, what do you mean? They're like, we're sending you to North Carolina. He says, but my family's in West Virginia. They said, yeah, but you committed your crime in North Carolina. You're getting on a bus. You're leaving in 30 minutes. So he gets on this bus. He ends up in North Carolina, gets there about 8 o'clock at night, and the federal building's closed. He has nowhere to go. He doesn't know anybody in North Carolina. He's been in prison 20 years. So he calls me and says, bro, I don't know what to do. They told me, hey, come to the federal building tomorrow morning. What am I going to do tonight? So I'd send him some money to get some food and get him a hotel room. And he set up a Cash App or whatever he had to do real quick. Oh, no, we Western Union him money. So me and my wife went and Western Union him money, man, right when Western Union was closing. So when guys are getting out of prison like that, they're not prepared. And what happens? What happens when a guy don't have a place to go or food to eat? What do? They go back to doing what they were doing before, robbing, stealing. I'm desperate. I got nowhere to sleep tonight. My stomach's touching my back. I'm hungry. I got no money. I got no food. You have to better prepare people. And, the system should be doing that. And they say that they are, but a lot of times they're not. There's a money grab, right? Reentry. We're going to do that. It's a money grab. And, maybe you guys are young guys and maybe you don't realize this, but there's a lot of cons out here. I say, a lot of people are just, saying what they think people want to hear and taking the money and doing nothing. So, I mean, there's not much that as a citizen you can do You know, you own a business. Give a guy a chance. Because a lot of guys that have done a lot of time in prison, 8, 9, 10 years, they appreciate their freedom. They want a good job. They want to make good money. They want to come to work every day. And that's something about prisoners. Like, a lot of prisoners have a good work ethic, man. I did. Even in prison, I wanted the place clean. I lived here. I used to clean the bathrooms. They didn't pay me. I cleaned them because I lived there. I was in a prison with 300 people in one unit and one officer, and a community bathroom on each floor. I wanted it clean. So me and that guy, James Thompson, we get up and clean the bathrooms every day, clean where we live, clean our range, and we made stuff nice, man. But, you know, give guys a chance, because there's a lot of guys that want to do right. A lot of guys are, it's not like the old days where they get out and they want to reoffend. I got friends right now. One guy owns he was the first interview I did. Gilbert Stites, one of my best friends. He's been out about 7, 8 years, owns a sign company, doing all kinds of signs for Amazon. You know, people really appreciate that stuff, man. I got a guy that got out of prison, convicted felon, got out. He's been out 25 years, owns one of the biggest construction companies in Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania. So, you know, people do want opportunities. Give them one.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree with that. This program had, or this organization had a program called Ready for Work, and it would basically be a 5-week program where they were taught everything from writing a resume to getting resources to be able to have free like dress clothing. And we actually sat down and helped a few of them with their resume one-on-one. And it was just crazy to see like how qualified they were to do what they wanted to do. Like, some of them had business license already. They were forklift certified, and you could tell that they just had a passion for wanting to find a job and be able to have this stability in their life that they haven't had before. So I completely agree with you on that. Now, do you have feelings of regret about what could have happened if you never were in prison? Because obviously you've helped hundreds, maybe even 1,000 people by inadvertently being imprisoned. What do you think would have happened if you weren't?
Well, let me tell you this, right? Towards the end, I had met who's my wife today. I met her and I was like, you know what? I started to change my life. I started telling, I had owned a construction company also, home improvement company, roofing, siding, and I owned a pizza shop. I put a pizza shop together, and I was like, man, I love this girl and I want to do the right thing. I don't want to end up in prison. And I was starting to work my way into that. And I had a certain amount of drugs that I had purchased that was left. And I had told her, I said, when this is gone, I'm done. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this no more. I don't want to live this life. And I was 24 years old. It might not sound like a lot, but I had about 200,000, a little more than that, owned a pizza shop, owned a construction company, 24 years old. And I was said, you know what? I'm on the right path. As soon as these drugs are done, I'm done. Would I have changed my life? I think I was getting to the point where I was changing my life. And then going to prison for 17, 18 years. I used to always, I believe in God, right? I believe in Christ. I'll be straight up about that. Wasn't always a Christian. I'm not a Bible thumper, but I believe in God. I believe God got me out of prison. But I would always say, God, man, why are you leaving me in here? You know what happened. This is what happened in my case. I deserve to go to prison. What's going on? And you know what? I felt like God let me out at the time that he wanted me to get out. And he let me out right when the compassionate release stuff happened, right when COVID hit. And I was able to make, good money helping people get out of prison. I was able to buy a vehicle. I was able to purchase a house. But at the same time, help people get out of prison. And I'm a firm believer that there's no problem with making a dollar if you're making a difference. But if you're taking the money and not making a difference, then, I got an issue with that, man. I got a real issue with that. And I have issues with some of these prison advocates, these people, because I know the truth. I know their story. I know they're full of shit. I know they're not really helping people. And they know who they are. And they know that I know. And, I have this thing in me, man, where I used to hurt, man. Prison hurts. It's not just about the violence and, the fear. It's about going to bed hungry at night. It's about not being with your parents on Christmas. It's about thinking, wow, I'm 24 and I'm not going to get out till I'm 64. And then you're 30 and you're thinking, damn, I'm never going to have kids, and then you're 35, like, man, I still can't get out of here. I'm definitely not going to ever get married or have children. And then you're 40 and you're like, wow. And then bang, something happens. The law changes. And I get a chance, man. I got out of prison, and honestly, I don't know if I have any pictures here, but here, I'll show you. Eventually I get out of prison. I reconnect with the girl that I was married to. That's her. And we have this is an old picture. We have 2 twin boys, right? Chase and Charlie. So you know what? When you're in there, like I said, it hurts. You think, man, I'm never going to have kids. I'm never going to be normal. And I used to think that all I want to do is be normal. And eventually, man, by the grace of God, I got out of prison. I was able free for, I said, people want a chance. I appreciate my freedom today. Back then, I didn't appreciate it. And you know what? It probably took me 8 or 9 years before I started to appreciate my life and appreciate my freedom.
So kind of when you were in prison and then when you got out, are there any habits that kind of translated over from being in prison that have stuck with you?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I was in some very dangerous prisons in my life, right? I wrote a book about it. Caden, did you ever read the book?
No, I haven't. No, but I mean, it's ordered. Hey.
So, it's called Blood on the Razor Wire. It's a true story about federal prison. There is some violence and there's a lot of violence in it because that's the life that we lived, right? And your viewers can get it on Amazon. But anyway, being in that environment, I used to watch people. I got to worry every day whether or not I'm going to live or die. Literally, I could get killed in federal prison because of something that some other white, because it's racially segregated too, just so you know, that some other white guy did in another unit. So when I first got out of prison, I ended up staying with my uncle for about 2 weeks, and then I got a townhouse, right? Which, let's talk about that. Almost impossible to get anybody to rent me an apartment. Oh, convicted felon? Nope. Convicted felon? Nope. So I had to have somebody that worked at the Federal Defender's Office in my city. They went and rented the apartment in their name, so I had a place to live. So it's out in the suburbs, nice place. You think it's probably safe here. But at night, I was afraid to be in there. I heard everything. I slept with a knife in prison. Unfortunately, I kept a knife with me for many, many years. I slept with a knife in a maximum security prison. As I went down lower, I ended up with I had a razor blade when I was in a medium security. I put the knife away and I wanted to always keep a weapon, right? When I went to a low, I didn't keep the knife in my room, but I kept a knife close outside of my room, up on some pipes in case something ever happened. So getting out of prison, I kept that habit. So at my apartment, I slept with a knife. I kept the lights on in the hallway, in the bathroom. I put my dresser. Some people might be like, damn. I put my dresser in front of my door at night. And then I'd have to use the bathroom at 2, 3 in the morning. You know what that's like, waking up? And then you got to move your dresser and I'm looking. I mean, this is the reality of prison. Prison does this to you. It makes you fearful. It makes you, you hear everything and you're always on point and always aware. I've gotten a lot better. I don't sleep with a knife under my pillow anymore. But I do have things around the house in case something ever happened, I can protect myself. But those are things that prison does to people, and not just me, but many people.
And kind of piggybacking off of that, obviously you're talking about these situations that you were in prison in personally. I don't think I would take that over my current life, obviously. But I was just wondering, like, you go through all these situations and you're still thinking, man, like you said, I got 20 more years in here. How do you find motivation to just keep going in prison? Is it just that kind of instinct of you need to survive, or like?
Certain people are different, right? Some guys get in there and they can't handle it and, they check out. They're like, hey, it's over. I'm giving up. But in my mind, man, I've always been a fighter. I'm Irish, man. I'm a fighter. Like I told you guys, my parents are from Indiana. So, we got that fighting Irish spirit and I could never give up. And I was angry. I was angry at the government that they thought it was okay to give me 40 years. And I used to say, I got to get out of here. And if I don't believe it, no one else will, right? So that's what motivates people, man. Like, you keep fighting, you want to be free. Freedom is great. And you take it for granted at times, but once you're in prison and you lose it, now you want it so bad that you're going to fight for it. And eventually I said, I'm going to do something every day to get out of prison. I don't care if I write a congressman, if I write a senator, if I take a rehabilitation class, if I write my judge, which I wrote my judge numerous times in jail. I had a friend that said, you need to write the judge and tell him everything that you're doing in your life. And I said, man, I ain't writing that dude. He said, you need to write that guy. And you know what? He was right. I wrote him. And I was shocked. A month later, I got a letter back where he said, you always came across as an intelligent young man. Unfortunately, you used your intelligence for the wrong things. And pretty much was, expressed that I'm sorry that I had to give you 40 years, but that was the mandatory minimum. I had to give that to you, and I wish you the best. And eventually, I would send them updates. This is what I did. This is what I got a college degree. I did this. I'm teaching Leaders Breed Leaders. I'm teaching alternative violence project seminars. I mean, I'm the facilitator here. And I just kept sending that stuff. And then they changed the law. And 3 years later, all them letters I wrote, all the things I sent to my judge, he said, you know what? I'm going to let this kid out of jail. I'm going to give him a shot. When I say kid, I don't mean kid, but it's just how we talk in New York, right? And eventually, I get out, and my judge wrote me. He wrote me and said, you've been home for a year and a half now. At that time, I'm glad that you're doing these things. And then eventually my judge says, I want to meet with you and your wife and your 2 kids in my chambers. I want to talk to you in person. And this happened about 8 months ago. So I go in there, he says, look, I went out on a limb for you, and this was not an easy case. I'm happy with what you're doing. Keep doing the right thing. And I admire him. And I had told him, if I had a dad like you, I probably would have never went to prison. I might have went to Notre Dame. I might have been playing football. And, that's an aspect that a lot of people don't understand. People think that, you made your own choices. But when you're 7, 8 years old and you're growing up poor and you got no food, you learn to steal, right? You're 9, 10 years old and other kids are making fun of you because you got holes in your sneakers. So now you're like, you know what? I'm going to steal some sneakers. And then when you're 12, you're like, you know what? I'm going to start robbing. These are the people that you're growing up around. Guns are in the neighborhood. You get a gun and you say, I'm going to rob someone. I don't just want, to eat tonight. I need clothes. And you know what? Our lights went off at our house. We can't pay the gas and electric. And I'm not saying me particularly, but this is what happens. These kids never had a chance, man. Sometimes they got to play the cards that they're dealt. And there's so many people like that. You'd be shocked how many people I've met in prison, right? From New York, a lot from New York City that couldn't read and write. They get a letter from their mother or a Christmas card and say, hey, Chad, can you read this to me? I'm embarrassed, bro, but can you read? And then they bring you a stack of letters that they've got for the last year that they hid in their locker because they didn't want no one to know they couldn't read and write. And you read them to them. And you're reading them, and it's from his girlfriend, and she's telling him she loves him. Then eventually the letter starts saying, look, I found someone else. And then the guy starts crying like, damn, that's why I haven't heard from her. And, you got these 19-year-old kids that they give 30, 40 years to that don't even know how to read and write. Took that stuff personal. And those are the kids that I would help in the law library. But I'd make a deal with people. You want me to help you with your law work? You got to learn your case number. You got to get enrolled in school. You got to get your GED. And I'm going to help you. And I help people for free. I charge money sometimes, but I help plenty of people for free. But it was, hey, you got to come to my alternative violence project seminar. You got to come to my Leaders Breed Leaders class. You got to sign up for GED. Let me give you another example. I don't want to take over your show. If you want me to be quiet, just be like, hey. Anyway, I'm in Raybrook, New York. I'm at a FCI, Federal Correctional Institution, medium security. And there's these kids in these classes for 2-3 years that don't have their GED. Like, what? So I start a fast track GED class. Every single one of my students got their GED within 90 days, I think, except for one. He had some learning disabilities, but eventually he got it. And right after I did that, right, these teachers were pissed off. They're pissed off that all these guys got their GED because they've been in your class for 3 years and couldn't get it. They come to my class and they get it in 90 days. Like, I made them work. A lot of them kids are in class. The teacher ain't doing nothing. She's sitting in the office on her phone or on her computer, not teaching nothing. I go in there and taught these dudes. And what did they relate to? A lot of them were drug dealers. So you got to start with the basics, right? And that's what I used. To teach them math, I used drugs. Okay, you got 2 quarters. What is that? That's a half ounce. Okay. So if it was 2 quarters, that would be 50 cents, right? And that's how I taught these dudes, man. And I taught them how to write. I had on that GED, you got to write a resume. That was one of the biggest issues. They couldn't write resumes. So I came up with a formula. And I put the formula together and taught these dudes how to write. So, that's prison. And that's an example of no one caring. But I went in there and cared, man. When these guys couldn't read and write, I wanted to teach them. I've had guys where I taught how to read and write that we started with Clifford the Big Red Dog, literally. You're sitting down with a 25-year-old guy teaching them how to read with Clifford the Big Red Dog. At first, they're embarrassed. And then they're like, yo, man, let's do it over here in the corner, right? And then eventually they're like, damn, bro, I can read now. And they're happy. They're excited. I had a Mexican kid that was my cellie. It's my cellmate. Couldn't get his GED because he couldn't write an essay. His English was a little bit, he could speak English, but writing it was hard. Got him his GED. Then they started giving out, the First Step Act and all that stuff. They started doing college programs in the prison. Eventually, he signs up for college. He's ready to quit. I can't do it. When he first signed up, he called his grandmother, his mom. He's the first person in his family to go to college. It's in prison, but he's going to college. And then 2 months later, he's like, Chad, I can't do it, man. I'm quitting. And I talked him into not quitting. And he ended up with an associate's degree, man, in business. So that's some of the stuff that I've done in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. Obviously, I've never been in the system, but you providing even that obviously huge spark or even just a little spark in those people's lives that, kind of seem completely down on themselves, like nothing going their way. I think that's a huge thing that you do, and I give you props for it. Definitely.
Yeah. A big thing is a lot of people basically want prisons abolished to a certain degree. And I definitely think that the amount of prisoners should be reduced and they should lean on a rehabilitation. And it's funny that they have things like Department of Corrections, which is labeled for like, oh, we're going to rehabilitate you. But and most times they have very few programs that do that. Could you think of some programs that should be in more prisons? Because you talked about like colleges and getting GEDs. Even then, it is very rare and far and few in between that prisons have college programs, let alone good ones. What are some ideas you think that could improve prisons nationwide?
So this is something that I've always said, right? And if they're really about rehabilitation, you're really about, changing lives and changing the community and giving people a chance. Let's say you get sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, right? They give you a 20-year sentence. I think they should say, you know what? We got a prison for you, right? You want to get in trouble, you want to be in a gang, you want to sell drugs, we got a prison for you. We're going to send you over here. But if you want to get out of prison, we got this program. It's going to take 6-7 years. The first 2 years, we're going to get you in here. We're going to get you a GED, teach you character education. I think character education is number one. We got to teach you how to get up and make your bed. We got to teach you how to brush your teeth and comb your hair, because you'd be shocked at how many people can't do that. We got to teach you how to dress right, pull your pants up, You can't be out here, owning a business with your pants hanging off your ass, right? You guys agree? So I think there's a 6-year program. You can come here and earn your way out of prison. This is your incentive. You can do 20 years or you can do 6-7 years. First 2 years, GED, character education. Next 2 years, we're going to teach you a trade. Next 2 years, we're going to get you a college degree. You're going to earn your way out. But if you don't want that, then you can go over here and do your 20 years. Like I said, you have to get people job ready instead of jail ready. So I think that that's something that they should do, that they can do. I think that they should put cameras on cops in prison. I think they should be accountable on all staff members. I'm not a hug a thug. I'm not a bleeding heart liberal. For anyone that's listening, I'm more of a conservative that believes in second chances, man. Tax dollars. You think we should waste tax dollars on over incarcerating people for 20 years that are rehabilitated? This guy's rehabilitated in 6-7 years. He appreciates his freedom. He got a GED. He's got a college education, but he's got 13 more years. We can't live in a lawless land. We have to have prisons. We have to have jails, right? But I also think that people should be able to earn their way out. And you get it. This is your second chance. You want a second chance? We're going to give it to you. But if you mess this up, then we know what time it is. I'm not big on excuses either, man. Well, my life was, oh, man. I got a guy that called me today, for example, right? Had life. This guy had a life sentence. I'm not going to say his name, but he had a life sentence. Gets out on compassionate release, tells me how great it is. He's so happy. He marries a girl a woman from another country that was a pen pal. He brings her here. She's educated. She's doing some big things. And now he's starting to slip. He had a YouTube channel. He's starting to slip off. He did legal work. He was writing, articles. And now he's, drinking and drugging. And I talked to him today. He's like, yeah, but you don't understand addiction. And so I said, look, I understand this, that you had a life sentence. I understand that you quit using drugs in prison for 5 or 6 years before you got out. So either you appreciate your freedom or you don't. You can't call me crying. You appreciate this woman because you're going to lose her. You're 50 years old, bro. You want to go back to prison for the rest of your life? You had a life sentence. Not everybody changes, but I think a lot of people do. And this is just an example of no excuses, man. Either you appreciate your freedom or you don't. And he's like, and some people might get mad. Well, you don't, because he did it. You don't understand addiction. No, I think you're using it as a crutch. You were clean for 5 or 6 years. You decided to go back there. You decided to walk back into that house. You decided to use those drugs. So now you have to make a decision. You want to continue doing that, or you want to go back to prison, or you want to be free? So, I mean, that's just a little piece. I think prisons are overcrowded because I think some of our laws are outrageous. Example, 24 years old, they gave me 40 years, right? I deserve to go to prison, but didn't deserve 40 years. You got guys that, I talked about earlier. I'll give you an example. Billy D. Williams, poor kid growing up in North Carolina, gets caught with 10 bags of crack, dime bags, $100 worth of crack, right? If you could hold it in your palm of your hand. He gets that felony, young kid, doesn't learn his lesson, catches another drug felony, gets caught with 30 bags of crack, $300 worth of crack. So now he's got $400 worth of crack, right? He's 22 years old. He gets out, he gets probation, he gets out, didn't learn his lesson, right? But it isn't that he didn't learn his lesson, it's that that's all he knows. He's poor. He doesn't have an education. He can't get a job. And, he's been selling drugs, petty drug dealer. Gets involved in a conspiracy with someone else. 50 grams or more of crack cocaine. You can put that in your palm too, right? 50 grams. That's how much it is. His lawyer says, look, man, you're going to have to plead guilty. So he goes in there, he pleads guilty. His mandatory minimum's life. What lawyer would tell you to plead guilty to life at 22 years old? What lawyer would tell you to plead guilty to life? So Billy D. Williams has got life. I try to help him. I work on his case. We can't win. Eventually, Obama grants him clemency, right? Reduces his life sentence to like 24 years, and I think he's out now. But this is an example. You take this poor, and not on no racial stuff, but poor African-American kid, right? Growing up poor, maybe the parents are drug addicts, I don't remember. And you give him a life sentence at 22 years old. Did he deserve to go to prison? Yeah, he didn't learn when he got probation, right? But he didn't deserve a life sentence. You had to take this kid into prison and, get him, like I said, job ready. Give him 10 years. Let him get a GED. Let him, appreciate his freedom. It takes some time. Sometimes you got to appreciate your freedom. And that's why they're overcrowded, because you're giving people life sentences at 22 years old, man, for nonviolent drug offenses. Should it be a free pass? No, not at all. Should there be consequences? Of course. But not life, man. And, that's our prisons are filled with, people that are really petty drug dealers. A guy like Jamel Azell, people might think, well, he was robbing people. Yeah, he was. He was 19 years old and got 155 years. He ended up doing 20 years, and his judge let him out on compassionate release. But did he deserve life? Did he deserve 155 years? Probably not. It don't take 155 years to rehabilitate someone. We're supposed to be a country of second chances. That's why our prisons are filled up. You're giving out too much time. The time doesn't fit the crime in a lot of instances.
Yeah.
Now, I know.
No, go ahead, Alex. You're good.
Now, I know that in places like Oregon and maybe even Washington, they had established rehabilitation places. So if you do get caught with a certain, like under a certain amount of drugs, instead of sending you to a prison or jail, they send you to these rehabilitation places. How do you feel about that, instead of sending these people to jail where they might come out and then just do the exact same thing?
I think there has to be a point, right? Like I put a short up today with a guy that I knew. When I went to jail, he was a drug dealer around big drug dealers with kilos. Now he stands on the corner begging people for change. He's dirty, just horrible, right? A guy like him, I've talked to him numerous times, said, man, when are you going to get your life together, Jamie? Man, I'm going to try, bro. I'm going to try. There's been times where he's told me, man, after my mom died, I don't even care anymore. Should you give people opportunities through rehabilitation centers and not send them to jail? Yeah. But unfortunately, and we're going to look at this on both sides of the coin, right? There's people out here that say, well, you know what? We send them to rehab. Taxpayers are footing the bill. They get out and they're right back out there doing the same thing. They're back out there stealing from Home Depot. They're back out there running out of Walgreens or stealing meat at the grocery store, right? So I think there has to be some consequences. You want to give them a shot at rehab? Okay, but I don't know if you need to do it 4, 5, 6 times. Sometimes you have to go to jail. Sometimes it's jail that makes you appreciate your freedom. Sometimes it's knowing that, damn, I'm not getting out of here in 60 days, complete a rehab program, and I'm getting out in 60 days. I'm stuck here for 2 years. Now you can really get clean, right? You can get off drugs. I mean, there's drugs in jail too. Don't make no mistakes about that. Prison a lot more than the county jail. But when they're sitting in that county jail for a year, year and a half, 2 years, maybe that's what they need. Maybe that's what wakes them up. Maybe they need to miss a Christmas. Maybe they need their daughter to come on a visit and say, Daddy, I love you. I miss you. Why aren't you home? Why can't you come home for Christmas? Maybe that's what's going to hit them in the heart, right? So, I mean, I don't know if that answered your question, but I hope so.
Yeah, it did.
So on my trip, we went to a DOC, and we were able to talk to them one-on-one as well, which I thought was pretty crazy. But one guy said he went in early last year, and then he got out in November, and then he was back in by the time we went in March. And he said because the only reason he knew how to protect himself was with a gun, and that's what got him back in there. And so I definitely agree with you that I think that prisons going forward need to have the rehabilitation part. They need to have shorter sentences, but there still needs to be that want for freedom. What do you think are the most demoralizing parts of prison? Because when we went into the DOC, there was even like windows that you couldn't see through, so you couldn't even see the outside world. Like you talked about how you had to basically motivate yourself because no one else would do it for you. What do you think really demotivates people in prison?
Demotivates people is probably the way that you're treated, right? As soon as you walk into prison, you got to get butt ass naked, right? By another man. Hey, bend over, spread them, take your clothes off, run your fingers through your hair, lift up your scrotum. And this dude's like inspecting you, right? As far as, I guess to answer your question is, it's more like going to bed hungry at night, right? That hurts your feelings. That makes you say, damn, man, I don't want to go to bed hungry anymore. The way that the cops treat people, they treat you like you're in a third world country. Most of them, not all of them are bad, but a lot of them are. You know, they'll come in, destroy your cell, throw stuff all over the place. And you got to clean up your mess now. Take your pictures, throw them around. You're like, man, this is some bullshit. Or when they give you 20 years, you're like, damn, man, why should I do the right? I mean, doing the right thing for what? You know, I'm here for 20 years. I ain't got no family. I got to sell some drugs in here in order to survive. I got to get some contraband in here somehow. I got to make wine. I got to do, because I can't make it. They pay you, right? The prisons pay you. And let me tell you something. Federal prison used to pay people okay. Now they're paying people $9 a month. What can you do with $9 a month? You can't even get 30, what we call in there, crackhead soups. You can't even get a soup for every day for with $9. You can't do it. Soups in there are like 50 cents or 65 cents. So, I think food is a major component in prison. You feed people, then, they usually behave. But that's the part where you're like, damn, I got all this time. I'm hungry, man. I can't eat. I got dirty clothes. I've been in prisons where they gave me half a mattress. I said, I don't even have a mattress. They said, you'll figure it out in a couple of days. Shocking, right? You probably never expected to hear that. You send your clothes to the laundry. They come back and smell like cat piss because they put everybody's laundry together. We used to have washers and dryers. Obama passed that water deprivation bill and took the washers and dryers out. Now you have to use a community washer and dryer. Someone washes your clothes. You put it in a net bag with everybody else's stuff. And your stuff comes, your white t-shirts look like someone pissed on them. And they smell like cat piss. I mean, these are the small things that, demoralize you and just make you feel like, man, you feel horrible, man. You lay down at night and feel horrible.
Did you have like recreational time at most of the prisons you were at?
Yeah. So let me tell you what prison's really like, right? It's not, there are prisons where you're locked in a cell all day. So, for the most part, even in a maximum security federal prison, state prison, in the morning in federal prison, they come around, they do a count, and they unlock the doors. When they unlock the doors, you come out, you're in a big day room. There's this big old day room. There's TVs everywhere. They got a white TV. They got a black TV. They got a Hispanic TV. They got a sports TV. They got a movie TV. And if you're white, you sit in the white section. If you're black, you sit in the black section. I told you it's racially segregated. So you come out in the morning, you watch a little bit of news. They call chow. You leave, you go to the mess hall. You go down to the mess hall, you eat your food, you come back. Got about 30 minutes, they call work call. Most people have jobs. You might work in the law library. You might be a janitor. You might be a plumber. The prisoners run the prison, right? We fix everything. We build everything. So you go to work. then, around noon, they call go back. You go back from your job, go back to your unit, go to chow for lunch, eat lunch, and then you go back to work. And then after you're done working, they got rec. You go out to the yard. After you're done with chow at night, you can walk right to the yard. You go outside, they got basketball out there. Some places have weights, not many. Not many have them left. Pull-up bars, dip bars. You go out there and play baseball, football, whatever's going on. There's always something going on. But there's also always violence going on, right? So you go out there to the rec yard, that's where the violence happens. In the gym, in the rec yard, this guy owes this guy called this guy, a derogatory name. And the next thing you know, these guys are out there stabbing each other over a word. But yeah, we have recreation, we have things that we do. They have a band room. A lot of guys go down there and play the band. You can go to education. They got movies down there, I used to watch a lot of them National Geographic movies, animal movies, stuff like that. So yeah, there's always stuff to do in prison. Don't think that it's, you're locked in a cell, 24/7, 7 days a week, eating, bread and drinking water. That's not really how it is. But the separation from your family, from the people that you love, the freedom to walk down to the refrigerator and, get something to eat if you're hungry, or the freedom to jump in your car and just drive to Walmart, or you ran out of deodorant, and here you just, if you ran out, you're hit. You don't got nothing. So those are the parts of prison that hurt. Watching people commit violence, seeing people victimized. I've seen people killed in prison. That stuff affects you mentally and emotionally. Those are the things that make you say, damn, man, skip rec. I don't care about rec. I want to go home, man. I want to be free. I want to be in control of my life. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a big part of prisons too are the lack of pay, because you can buy a few things in prison, but aren't they like marked up normal prices too, like hygiene products and stuff?
Oh, of course. I mean, you can buy everything. You can buy sodas in there, cookies, cakes. We used to have microwaves. Like I told you, food is comfort in prison. We used to have microwaves. We could buy rice and pasta and mozzarella cheese and these bullcrap pizza kits where you put this bullcrap pizza together. But everything is marked up. Like I said, a soup, you can get 20 soups out here for $1 or whatever. In there, I mean, a soup is 60 cents, 70 cents. County jails, they're $1.25 for a soup. So the markup is high, and who foots the bill? Most people in prison are poor, no matter what people want people to think. But people are calling home and asking their mother for $30. Mom, can you send me $30? I don't have it this week, baby. I can't do it. People are going to bed hungry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because you really think about the prison system monetarily, and so you have guys working for what, maybe $1 a day, if that. I mean, you see guys in California fighting fires, and they're getting $2 per hour, and they're fighting actual fires, and I mean, they're risking their lives for it. And then you go into prison trying to buy something, it's marked up, so then you try and get your family members, but then you also have to deal with being able to call them, which is also marked up, and then you have to deal with them actually paying you, so like your family members paying you, but then you have to deal with, well, my family members are also paying taxes for the prison, and yet the prison isn't getting any updates either. And so then you just go back to the idea that, like, where's all this money going?
I was in a federal medical center in Kentucky, in Lexington, right? I actually went home from there, and I spent my last 9-10 months there. We had a hole in the ceiling, and I'll tell you something to make you laugh. They had these people come in from D.C. to inspect the place, and this big-ass hole in the ceiling with a tarp with a hose that ran out of the window. And even though I had 40 years, I used to joke around a lot, right? And I see the lady looking at it. And I said, well, yeah, if you're thirsty, just grab the hose and get a sip. And she was like, because, they had this tarp catching the water, and the hose was sending the water out the window. We got birds flying around in this place. And, when you buy commissary in prison, they have what's called the trust fund account. I was in a prison in Raybrook where we had like over $1 million in the trust fund. But that's from us purchasing commissary. They weren't giving it back to us. That's what it's supposed to be used for. That's what Congress did that for. They delegated that so that you can use it to buy basketballs and rec equipment and do things for the prisoners, right? They weren't doing that there. Instead, they bought 4 or 5 Kubotas for the staff to ride around on and boom and crash them and, do snow removal, but they're out there wheeling them around like they're go-karts, like they're kids. I mean, this is the reality of prison that people don't know about. So much wasted money. Federal prison, you had a counselor, you had a case manager, you had a unit manager. For what? They didn't do anything. What did they do? You're supposed to have a progress report and a team meeting. You go in there, they already got the thing filled out. You sign it and walk out. They're not there rehabilitating. They're not there helping people. You think you're having this unit team review, you're going to sit down and they're going to be like, well, look, you kind of need this program. We'll see you're doing good here. Good job. You got to fix this, fix that. There ain't none of that. You just walk in there and sign your name on your paper. And they act like they did what, they're supposed to do under policy, but they don't.
Yeah. Again, when I talked to this partner organization, one of the main people running it, she used to be a teacher, and she talked about how for kids that were slower, she had to make a individualized, personalized, like learning plan for them. But she said, wouldn't it be a great idea if they did that in prison? Because instead of just doing it for the slower kids, she did it for every kid so that they would each be on their path and no one would get left behind. And is there even anything sort of like that? You talked about progress reports, but those already being done. Like, is there any sort of personalized timeline for any prisoner?
I mean, policy says they're supposed to be, but no one, like I said, no one cares, man. Once in a while, you find someone that cares. I've been in prisons where even the chaplain don't care about you. And I've been in prisons where there's teachers that are, like, damn, man. I was in Raybrook, right? And a lot of people talk, crap about that place. It's in New York, but I had been there for 6 or 7 years. And when I left, I'm not afraid to say this on here. When I left, I was getting transferred to a low security, right? And one of the officers that, worked there, he came out from doing the truck on the perimeter. That was his position that quarter, to say goodbye to me, man. And he's like, look, man, I really hope you get out of here, man. You changed your life. I think you're a good dude that deserves a second chance. I had 4 or 5 of the cops say that to me. But this guy came out and actually, I shook his hand. That's a big no-no in prison, right? I was an orderly, man. I worked up in the front, when I was in Raybrook. And, I was out there cleaning the lieutenant's office every night in the kitchen at night. And they used to look out, take some food over here. You're not snitching, telling on people, none of that type of shit. People like to say that stuff, but that's not what's going on. But, they start to see you as a person instead of a prisoner, some people. And I can honestly say, like, them people over there, like the guy named Dara, that's the guy that came into, he was the super cop of the prison. Like, everyone's like, oh, he's searching. But you know what? There was a mutual respect. He respected me and I respected him. And he came out to say goodbye to me and tell me, I really hope you get out of prison, man. And that meant a lot to me, man. It meant a lot. So not everyone, I mean, a lot of people don't care, but there are people that do care. If you're doing the right thing, they see you and say, man, that guy deserves a second chance.
Yeah. What programs would you suggest to inmates right now to better themselves character-wise, but also like feel more protected or more respected that you went through?
It's not what programs. They need real programs, right? They got a bunch of bullcrap programs in there that they put on paper. Like, let me see if I can find this. Oh, here's a case that I just did. These are all this guy's programs here, right? Just did a compassionate release motion for this guy. He's got life. 19 years old, got a life sentence. He did some bad things. He killed was involved. He didn't personally kill people, but some people ended up dead. But let's see. He's got on here painless writing, inside out dad, painless spelling, painless vocabulary. Are these life skill training programs? Are they really going to get this kid ready if he did get out of jail? You need life skill training programs that really work. The best program that I've ever been involved in, and I was a facilitator, was Alternative to Violence Project Seminar. It's a nationally known program. They actually came in, you learned, and you know what? They made you think. It was like, hey, you got to think. There's a guy named Cedric Dean out of Charlotte, North Carolina. He wrote a program called Leaders Breed Leaders. I taught the program. A very good friend of mine. He wrote the program. Like, that taught people how to be real men, real fathers, real leaders. We did skits in there as, you're the father. You're talking to your son. You're dealing with real life things like that. I think, anything that has to do with banking. People got to be able to use a credit card when they get out. They got to know that when you go to Walmart, it's you're getting out in 15 years. It might be a cashless system. You got to know how to use this thing, man. Or else you can't do anything. You need life skill training programs, but number one is character education. You have to. it's just a big issue, man. Character education. A lot of people had no home training. You guys are all in college at a prestigious colleges. I'm sure, I don't know if you had a mother and a father and you sat down for dinner at 5 o'clock, but people need that, man. We need to go back to that stuff. So if you're a father getting out of prison, you need to come home and be a dad. Be a real father, a real man, a real leader. Be there for your son. Teach them the right things so that they're not in that position. But I just think life skill training programs, man, Alternative Violence Project Seminar, programs that really work. Teach people how to, go to work and get up and brush their hair and brush your teeth and how to do an interview and how to write a resume. You need that stuff, man. Everybody's not going to get out and own their own business. Everybody in prison thinks they are. But when they get out here, reality's real. It hits you. Sometimes I got a friend now, it's like, dude, man, I had this business and it fell apart. Now I'm delivering food for Uber. But I mean, he's making $1,000 a week. He's doing pretty good, right? I mean, considering the fact that he was in prison making $9 a month. But that's my take.
Yeah. So you kind of talked about it, but what was kind of the biggest culture shock specifically for you when you got out?
The phone, the cell phone. When I went to jail, a phone was a phone. I had a Sprint phone. I get out of jail now and I got an iPhone 14 and I tell people this, I told my boys, like, this ain't a phone. This is a computer with a phone in it. I can't work some of this stuff on here, man. Technology was the cultural shock. Homelessness, dude. When I came to my city, people were standing on the corner with signs. Before I went to jail, I didn't see that. There's people living under bridges. I had a very good friend, my best friend. He had two kids with a woman, and very pretty girl, Portuguese and Italian. When we were younger, beautiful, beautiful girl. And I see her. I'm 8 months out of prison. I see her. She's living under a bridge, bro. She's drug addicted. And she says, hey, man, give me some money. I said, tell me the truth. What are you going to do with the money? You need some food. She said, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to get high and I'm going to get something to eat. Can you help me? And I felt horrible, man. This was a girl that I loved and cared about. It was my best friend's child's mother, man. And it was just, that was a cultural shock to see friends, people that, were normal when I went to jail and came home and now they're using drugs and they're living under a bridge. And, the first day I'm driving to my mother's house, my mother lived in the same neighborhood for 50 years, since I was a kid. And some guy in the middle of the day, it's like 12 o'clock. I'm coming home from prison. I'm happy. And I'm driving down the main street where my mom lives. And there's some guy just urinating right on the sidewalk. There's kids around here, man. That was a cultural shock that the respect level is so low. When I went to jail, there was crime. I live in a very dangerous city. One of the most dangerous cities in the country. Extremely high poverty rate. Rochester, New York. I mean, they just killed a cop here. Like, it's bad, bro. People are getting shot and killed here every day. And back then, they would shoot you at night. Now they shoot you during the day. And there's cameras on the street poles. And I'm like, and they're still doing this? They're out here selling drugs hand to hand? So now we can go back to, this is why there have to be prisons. There has to be consequences. But I think the consequences got to fit the crimes. But that was my cultural shock. Cameras, cell phones, people just no morals, man. No respect for anybody. You got kids now are driving these Kia cars right into storefronts, Dick's Sporting Goods. They drove a car through Dick's Sporting Goods front window, stole everything. There was they hit 6 different places that night. They hit a dirt bike place, stole $90,000 worth of dirt bikes. They loaded up 2 vehicles, just drive right through the window. You would never see that before I went to prison. Now it's, no morals, man. No one cares.
You talked about, getting stabbed in prison, and I mean, I bet that's a pretty traumatic experience, but because I know basically nothing about it, can you talk about the healthcare system in prison?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a couple examples. Like when I was in Big Sandy, there was numerous people getting stabbed there. The medical people there actually cared about people. I had a cellmate that was stabbed, I think, 33 times. Punctured both of his lungs, stabbed in the face, and he was the wrong guy. They stabbed the wrong guy. He came from another prison. They thought he was someone else. And they saved his life. On the other hand, I've been to places like the Federal Medical Center in Lexington, Kentucky, and it was just a job. I mean, I seen people there where elderly people with Alzheimer's, and I would go up to like the hospice floor, right? And I would help these guys because no one would help them. I would help them with their compassionate releases, all for free. They couldn't fill out the paperwork. And, the staff up there, they're supposed to help. They didn't care, man. The healthcare, you hear a lot about healthcare, and I wrote for Criminal Legal News, Prisoners Legal News. The healthcare is horrible, man. For the most part, it's horrible. You go down there and you tell them, hey, man, something's wrong. They're like, take Tylenol, drink water, drink lots of water. And they don't, it's not like, when you go to the hospital and you're a kid, you get hurt playing football or something, and the nurse cares about you and they're talking to you and your mom, and you feel comfort, right? You feel like these people care about me. This is a clean place. It's a nice place. They're here to help me. In prison, you go down there and you say, hey, I just broke my arm playing football. They're like, well, wait over there. Don't get that close to me. Back up 3 feet. You're like, what my arm? So, yeah, healthcare sucks, dude. You want the truth? Healthcare sucks. I was there when COVID hit. I seen people die, man. I've seen people ran out on stretchers. I actually did an interview with the news. As soon as I got out, I told everybody, I'm going to get out of here next week, and I'm going to do an interview with the news and tell them what's going on here. Tell them what the problem is. Tell them how they got us all together, like sardines in a can. People need help. People were screaming from the other unit, hey, call my family. They locked the unit. It was called Antaeus unit. It's a federal medical center, right? Prison. It's a federal medical prison. Guys are in there 70, 80 years old. They're dying, man. And people are screaming. It was like, I don't want to compare it to a concentration camp, but people were yelling from one window to the other, hey, help! Call my mom. The number's 585. Please tell them. And dude, they were in there with hazmat uniforms on and boarding up the door. It was wild, man. It was wild. But healthcare does suck in prison. If you're sick, Caden, just drink some water.
So you've been talking about these programs that are offered in prison, and how you said that most of them, are just kind of blow off things. But I'm more interested in, obviously that's an interesting topic, but how are prisoners made aware of what programs are available? Like, is every prisoner in prison like included in these programs from the get-go, or how do they become aware that they can take these programs?
So in most prisons, like, they'll put up little bulletins, program Leaders Breed Leaders starting on April 25th, 7:00 p.m. Sign up in education. We only got 30 slots. So they do advertise a lot. However, if you're a guy that's got 20, 30, 40 years, you're usually for the good programs, you're on the back burner because, you're never getting out. So the guys that got 4 or 5 years, they got priority. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like me, I wanted to take that college program. They wouldn't let me. I ended up doing a correspondence course and got an associate's degree, but I couldn't take the program because I had too much time. So
what do you think has been what has been your favorite or like most entertaining guest that you've had on your show up to this date?
I'm gonna say, a lot of my guests, man, I like, but I've had 3 guests on, and they all fit the top guest. I had Troy Kell. I did an interview with Troy Kell. I don't know if you guys know who he is, but if you want to watch something about prison, if you got free time tonight, I promise you'll be glued to it. Watch Gladiator Days. Google Gladiator Days, Troy Kell. Troy Kell was a kid from Las Vegas, Nevada. This is how this whole prison genre really started for people that don't know. He was a young kid. He killed someone that was abusing his girlfriend, killed the guy, ends up with a life sentence, goes to prison. They end up shipping him to another state. They say, you know what, we're going to contract you out because you're a troublemaker. They contract him out, and he gets in a beef with a black guy, right? They're beefing on the door. What that means is they're arguing. They're talking junk back and forth. I mean, I've read the whole case file, so I know exactly what happened. And this doesn't mean that the dude should have been killed, but, the dude was saying some derogatory things, threatening, and and Troy was like, hey, you know what? This is in the court documents. He's like, I tell you what, man, when you see me, you see me. Well, him and another guy sign him up for medical, and they put his name on the list, and they get him to come out. And when he comes out, they brutally kill this dude, right? They stab him 70, 80 times. And this is all part of that documentary. I had Troy Kell on. HBO did that special in 2001. He's never done another interview since then because he said HBO painted him as this villain. They painted the narrative of, crazy white supremacist kills black guy in prison. And that was the narrative because that's what sells, right? That's how they sell tickets. It's what people want to see, unfortunately. A lot of people don't want to hear about reentry. They want to hear about the stabbings and the killings in prison and, the prison movie type stuff. So having Troy Kell on, and he's on death row now. So having him on, he was one of my top guests. I interviewed a guy that was part of the Mexican Mafia, the original. Just interviewed him 2 days ago. His videos just went up. The Mexican Mafia is probably, to me, along with the Serenos, their underparts, are the most dangerous gang in federal prison. They play no games. If the big shot caller, if the boss says, hit the warden, they're going to hit the warden, brother. So when he spoke, I listened. It was more of him talking than me actually interviewing, but he was a great guest. And then I interviewed the federal judge that went to the White House to meet with Trump. You guys remember that stuff? He went with Kim Kardashian. Well, that judge wrote an article about me in the USA Today, and while I was in prison, and said that I deserved to get out. And eventually, I would interview him. He went to the White House with Kim Kardashian, advocating for a guy named Chris Young that was sentenced to life. Same story. Poor, growing up in the hood, brother commits suicide. 851'd him because he had prior petty drug offenses. And the judge says, they spoke for 2 hours at sentencing. He just let him talk. And the judge somehow was brokenhearted that I had to give this intelligent young man a life sentence. And then eventually I would interview Chris Young on the channel. So, the judge and Chris Young, the judge that went to the White House to advocate with Kim Kardashian with Donald Trump. He's also representing Leonard Pelletier. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but Native American, sentenced to life, been in prison, 30, 40 years. So those were my top guests, man. All my guests, and I don't want anyone to get mad, but, to be able to talk to people like that, I've talked to former cops, former correctional officers. An active DEA agent came on with a mask on to give the message, to try to get, kids to say, hey, look, we're going to catch you. We got all this technology. This is how we do it, man. You're not smarter than us. So, stop doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I have one more question. So how important is it that how big of an influence do you think parents have on a child's life in terms of preventing them from going down that dark path and doing drugs and potentially going to jail?
I never realized this until, I had my kids, right? I got 2 little twin boys. I think a parent molds their child. I believe that wholeheartedly. I believe that there's a lot of parents, unfortunately, that are friends with their kids instead of parents, right? You got to be a parent. You have to mold your child. You have to influence their lives. You have to, eventually, it's sad because you see so many young kids dying with fentanyl overdose nowadays, right? And you say, well, they made that decision. People are going to make their own decisions. Kids are, I know a kid that I think's a really good kid. Works a job, pays his car payment. He's getting ready to go to Elford. Just really smart kid, right? But there was an incident or two where he smoked some weed. I would never have expected him to do something like that, right? But, kids are going to make choices. But I think that as a parent, you have to let them see the realities. These are the consequences. Yeah, you smoked a little weed. Probably not going to be enough. But what if it leads to fentanyl use or heroin use and overdose? And, it's just a gateway. They call it a gateway drug, right? So I think that you do have to be on your kids. You have to parent them. You have to be, kind. You don't have to be harsh all the time. But you have to let them know that these are the consequences. Like I got a program that I hope to put, be able to put out there, not put together, incarceration prevention class to take kids. And, this is to take kids to a morgue. This is what happens when you shoot someone. Take them to a courthouse. Watch a guy get sentenced that's 19 years old to 25 years to life. Take them to a business and say, look, this guy started when he was, 24. Now he owns this business. Now he owns this beautiful home. You have to give them everything. It's an 8-week course, man. Every week we go somewhere different. Courthouse, businesses. But I think that's the same thing as a parent. You got to say, look, this is what happens when you make these choices. Me, My wife's probably a little more stronger because I'm soft a little bit when it comes to kids. But if they're doing something wrong, I'm going to get on them, and I might be a little bit harsh at times, and they're going to know that I'm the boss. I mean, look at all of you guys. You're all in college. I'm sure your parents were on you. There may have been instances where maybe you might have done some things you shouldn't have done. You can look at you guys know the Murdoch case down in South Carolina.
Yes, yes.
Like those kids, right? The dad was was lawyer and money, and then you see the videos. These kids are out getting drunk, and parents shouldn't be drinking with their kids. You got a wine cellar down there, and they're down there taking stuff out. And like, go ahead, grab some. Never. That would never ever happen in my household. Never. And obviously there's other things coming out, but the dad was a nutcase, man. I think the dad killed a few more people. The dad was nuts. But I mean, I'm just using that as an example where you can't be, hey, my dad's cool as hell. My dad's going to protect me. He's going to do this. No, there's got to be some consequences. Sometimes you might have to, in today's day and time, you might have to spank your son. You ever get a spanking when you were a kid?
Yeah, all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
Sometimes
I got the wooden spoon too.
Well, sometimes that stuff works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yep.
My mother disciplined me. My father was a drug addict, left the house when we were young. I had a stepfather, but you know what? As soon as he left the house, I thought I was the man of the house. And now the discipline was gone. And that's where I went downhill because, as crazy as it sounds, I never used drugs, never smoked weed. I never drank alcohol until I was 21. I went to spring break in Panama City Beach, Florida. I was like, I'm going to drink with my buddies. I was always an athlete. I was an amateur fighter. I was the kid in the neighborhood where other parents were like, I want you to hang out with Chad. And, like I said, but my mom was a single mother. Things went bad. We were poor. And I made some choices, man. I made choices to start selling drugs. And, I hate to say it, but I was a product of my environment too. Yeah, of course I made my own choices, but was the neighborhood that I lived in. This is what I learned. But I think parents have to be parents and not just friends.
I completely agree.
Before we wrap up, one last question. What are some resources or programs that you want to point to people that want to get more involved with prison reform and understanding more about the legal system?
I mean, there's all kinds of organizations out here, right? I'm going to tell you the number one guy on reentry. His name's Cedric Dean. He's in Charlotte, North Carolina. People can Google him, see what he's doing. I mean, he's doing big, big things. I'm going to go down there this month and have a meeting with him. And, he's one of my good friends in prison. He wrote, 20 books, all kinds of programs. He's the guy that told me to write my judge. I don't think there's a lot of resources out here for, that like people think. There's just not. And that's why I'm going to go down there and meet with him, and I'm going to come back and we're going to put some stuff together in my city. I mean, people are struggling everywhere, when they get out of prison. They need clothing. They need resources, man. They need housing. Housing, you got nowhere to live. What are you going to do? I mean, I wish I could point you to a bunch of people. 2 years ago, I could have. But, I've learned that these people are not who they say they are. And I despise them now because I do care about people, man. I do care. It does matter to me because I was the guy that was in there begging people to help me. I was the guy that got out of prison. And honestly, I got family and everything. But I wasn't comfortable living at my uncle's house. When I went to prison, it was a nice neighborhood. When I came home, there was a shootout in the street and someone shot through the room that I was sleeping in. There was a bullet hole in the closet. I'm like, I'm going to a hotel. I'm not living here. I had to live at a hotel for a little while. So there's not a bunch of resources. I mean, some cities there are, but not a whole lot. There's another guy named Adam Clausen. Adam had 300 years. He got out on compassionate release. He's in Las Vegas, Nevada. He's doing big things on reentry, and he really cares about people. But they're far and few in between, man, and I hate to say that, but it's the truth.
I guess I have kind of two more questions, but they're kind of just out of curiosity. So I watched a documentary about kind of like the different gangs and groups in prisons, and I was just wondering if you've ever heard of, like, I think it's the White Iranian Brotherhood or the White Christian Brotherhood. I heard that they're like make up less than 1% of the population in prison, but 50% of the crime. I don't know if that's true.
Is that in Indiana?
I think it's like worldwide, but I'm not sure.
I don't know if you're talking about the White Christian Identity Movement with Matt Hale. He used to be the leader of that.
I'm not sure.
Dude, there's so many different white gangs and black gangs and
Yeah.
Mexican gangs. Like I never heard of them in federal prison, who you said specifically, but I mean, there's all kinds. You got Aryan Resistance Militia, SAC, Soldiers of Aryan Culture, DWB, Dirty White Boys, Aryan Brotherhood. I mean, those are some of the white gangs in federal prison. Black gangs, you got the Bloods, you got the Crips, you got BGF, Black Guerrilla Family out of Baltimore. I mean, the Mexicans, you got the Sereños, the Norteños, the Mexican Mafia. I mean, those are some of the Hispanic gangs. Nietas, Latin Kings, Midwest gangs, the Gangster Disciples. You guys are down here in Indiana. Be careful.
Yeah. And then I guess my second question is kind of just, I'm assuming you're a big fan of the UFC then, since you were an amateur fighter and you have a Conor McGregor
picture?
meal. Yeah. I just kind of wanted to know, who do you think is, in your eyes, like the greatest of all time?
The greatest UFC fighter of all time. I'm going to tell you guys who my favorite fighter of all time was in UFC. It was Forrest Griffin. You guys remember him?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Him and Stephen Bonner. Stephen Bonner just recently died. I think that was the greatest UFC fight ever. It put UFC on the map. I remember watching it in jail. I was housed at an immigration facility in Batavia, New York, and we were watching it, dude. They let us stay up late and watch it. But the best ever, you know where John Jones is from, don't you? He's from here. He's from here. I mean, he puts on his thing, Ithaca, New York, but he's from Rochester. He's from Rochester, New York. I think John Jones is probably the best that ever did it. I mean, and, obviously he had his issues, drug problems, and, both of his brothers played in the NFL, but I think he's the best that ever did it. I wish I could say Conor McGregor, but no. And let me make this mention. Cody Garbrandt. You guys know who he is?
I've heard of the name.
Well, Cody was a bad dude, man. He beat Dominic Cruz, and then what was the kid's name that beat him, man? The blonde hair kid. He missed him at the end of the round. He missed him with that uppercut, and TJ Dillashaw ended up beating him. But let me tell you about Cody real quick, since you're into UFC. He had this kid, man, that had cancer, and the parents reached out to Cody and was like, "Hey, man, could you talk to our son?" And he talked to him, and he went and visited him, and he said, "Look, man, I'm gonna go down there and win this title, bro." He said, "But that's because I'm gonna keep fighting." And the kid was like, "Look, man, I can't do it no more, Cody. I can't take the medicine. I'm sick. The medicine hurts. It's nasty and makes me vomit. I can't fight no more." And Cody told him, "Man, you keep fighting, bro. Don't ever give up. And I'm gonna win this title. We're gonna make a pact here. You're gonna keep fighting. I'm gonna keep fighting. I'm gonna win this title." And he took him to that Dominic Cruz fight, and he went down there and won the title and put the kid in the ring with him and put the belt on him and said, "Man, you're the champion. You're the fighter. You're the true champion." And you know what? For a dude like that, he's got all the tattoos on. He's blasted out. I mean, what makes you the best fighter ever, right? Like, to take that kid and do that, man. And it wasn't like he wasn't doing it for show, but in my eyes, man, that's the best fighter, man. Cody Garbrandt, who did that for a kid and talked him into continuing with his cancer treatment and not just giving up on life. So
Yeah.
Who do you think's the best fighter ever?
I agree with you. I think John Jones is
So,
just, way above everyone.
he's way above.
A big thank you. I mean, for you to be able to take the time out of your very busy schedule of being a paralegal, being an author, being a father, and I guess making our dream come true of having someone as important as you on our podcast that has 75 subscribers, basically.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of the Dawg Podcast. Make sure to check him out on YouTube at Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below your favorite prison reform program.
Peace.
Hey, thanks for getting to the end of the video. If you liked it, consider subscribing. If you want to see the curated playlist for this video, click the top picture. And other videos that you might like will be posted in the bottom picture. This has been Just Another College Kid, and I'll see you in the next one.